There are two different types of motivation, extrinsic and intrinsic. Extrinsic motivation is when you are motivated to do something for external reasons, such as to gain rewards or to avoid punishment. Intrinsic motivation is when you're motivated to do something for internal reasons, such as personal enjoyment or achievement. There are different consequences for our behavior depending on whether we are extrinsically or intrinsically motivated to do something. To illustrate these differences, let's look at children's reading behavior. We often want to encourage children to read, so one way we can do this is to provide extrinsic motivation to increase how much children read. One form of extrinsic motivation is to use a token economy, where children receive points or tokens for each book they read that they can then exchange for prizes. Now, what effect will this have on children's reading? Let's look at two different children. Prior to providing the extrinsic motivation to read, Sarah hates reading, and so she hardly ever reads, while John loves reading, and he always reads. Now, what happens when we provide extrinsic motivation for these two children to read? Well, it works. They both start reading more and receive tokens to exchange for prizes. But what happens when the extrinsic motivation stops? Now that they no longer receive tokens for reading, what will happen to their reading behavior? Well, as you might have guessed, without the rewards, Sarah, who hated reading, will go back to not reading. But what about John, who originally loved reading? What will happen to his reading behavior? Well, you might have thought that without the reward, John would simply go back to reading as often as he did before the extrinsic motivation, because after all, he did love reading. But ironically, John, just like Sarah, will also stop reading once the reward stops. Now, why would this happen? It is because the reasons for John's reading have changed. Before the token economy, there were no external reasons why John read, and therefore he was only intrinsically motivated to read. That is, he only read because he just simply enjoyed reading. But once the token economy was in place, when he reflects back on why is he reading, he attributes his reading behavior to the extrinsic motivation of wanting to get more points to redeem for prizes, and not because he liked to read. So now that the extrinsic motivation is gone, he sees no reason to read and stops.